HBO's Bill Maher recently sat down with New Hampshire Governor Chris Sununu to discuss his political future, which prompted a discussion on socialism. Let's watch.
Okay, well, America has always been quasi-socialist, or at least for the last century and a half. Social Security is socialism. The Marine Corps is socialism. Every advanced democracy is quasi-socialist.
Are you saying that where we were in America 30 years ago is where we are today? Oh my God!
I'm not saying that.
It's an absolute assault on capitalism, on democracy, on federalism, and I think that's even coming from certain Republicans as well.
Well, in the 50s, the tax rate went up to 70%.
Yeah,
sometimes
really
even 90%.
Bad idea, right?
Okay.
And we fixed it. We had to fix it.
So we actually were more socialist then.
I wouldn't have voted for those presidents either.
Okay, well, some of them were Republican.
Yeah. A bad idea, right? No, that's absolutely true. So it's terrible idea.
But I mean, you're comparing, I mean, again, this is where you lose me, and I'd like to be a fan of a guy like you, but I just can't. If you don't admit that what Donald Trump tried to do, not recognizing a fair election, is just not comparable to incremental socialism.
So the framing of this conversation here, I guess, is an effort to perhaps minimize the significance of Trump's indictment by comparing it to what the crazy socialist left has been up to in the United States. And we get to this point.
What have you been up to?
Look, as we talked about in another segment, I think it's completely legitimate as to feel like most Americans feel like that the Trump indictment is politically driven, and to also feel like most Americans feel like that is justified. You know, and that when you break the law, everybody should be held accountable. That the potential issue there is that more people aren't held accountable, not that Trump should join the ranks of folks who've never been accountable for their actions. Okay, that aside, what do you make of this idea, this abstraction of socialism that keeps being brought up as a way to stigmatize the left? Is it effective anymore? And is Bill Maher, who is no friend of socialists, I would say, is his rejoinder that many of the most beloved aspects of American society are in fact socialist? Yeah, a good pushback.
I mean, I think this rests on the reality that what precisely is socialism is like notoriously difficult to spell out, including by socialists who will be like, you have to read 18 books to properly understand it.
Those people are annoying to everyone. But I actually don't think it's that complicated.
Well, we have a mixed economy. We have, sure, we have a social safety net. Many on the left think it should be more robust than it is. Yes, we provide a certain amount of welfare and protection to people. We have our healthcare industry, our education industry, aspects of our banking industry, the auto industry at one point have had significant. It's so mixed, so much government involvement that you might very well say they are socialist in their construction.
Well, I would say regulation isn't socialism. Those are two different things. When at least kind of Bernie style.
How are you defining socialism?
Well, when Bernie style socialists are talking about it, they're largely, and this is a really under-discussed aspect of it, but they're largely talking about having more worker control of the means of production. So what they're saying is right now we have an economy where workers, because of the diminishment of labor in particular, have a very little access to the gains in productivity that they have been making, you know, consistently over time, and that more and more of profits have been going to the 1%. There's been more control over government by the 1% consequently because of lobbyists and their ability to use their lobbying power to diminish laws that would have made them less able to interfere in politics through their extreme wealth. You have multiple billionaires running in the last presidential election who are completely self-funded and only even able to participate because of their billions of dollars. And to say that fundamentally that's a problem. And to the extent that we have a country now that says the profit motive should drive everything, all of our kind of political decisions should be in favor of the markets, is backward. And that in fact, the role of government should be directed toward supporting society. We're going to put society first and the market second. And so that we don't have the kind of craven decision-making that says, well, if health insurance companies need to profit, you go bankrupt or aren't able to get treated for cancer, and you simply flip that the other way around.
Okay, so right, so there's a couple different aspects there. Like if it's just, I mean, if it's just workers having more say over the direction of the firm, more control over it, more ownership of the means of production, and that's socialism. I mean, that's not necessarily, I mean, you could have that could be part of a voluntary social order where we're just like, that's the arrangement of a firm that doesn't necessarily involve government. If it involves
right, it's not about exactly.
Right,
it's not about
right.
more government control. It's having more democracy, including democracy in the workplace.
Right.
And I know that there are people who are very afraid of authoritarianism because there have been various regimes across the world that have been authoritarian and who have called themselves socialists. There have also been a much larger number of capitalist regimes that have also been authoritarian by the nature of the fact that most regimes in the world are capitalist. There have been very few socialist countries that, frankly, America has allowed to even exist because of our pattern of intervening and toppling the leadership of democratically elected socialist countries.
China operated through most of the 20th century. You're saying that's not real socialism. They called themselves socialists.
And so did Hitler, but there was no socialism there. In fact, Hitler talked about wanting to capitalize on the popularity of socialism by branding his party in that way.
I didn't accuse Germany of being socialist. I accused China of being socialist.
No, I know, but that's another argument that people make.
So critics of socialism from the right will say that, again, I don't care what we call it. What is being criticized is central government bureaucratic planning of the economy that they will say is bad for like economics 101 reasons, because without a marketplace where there's competition, you can't use the profit incentive to figure out what the price of things should actually be, and you create a society that doesn't have enough wealth to prosper, and you can have that while still having a social safety net. And
but here's the thing. If Chris Sununu is going to raise the specter of socialism as his threat, then he has to point to somebody, anyone in the American context who is arguing for that, who isn't somebody in a dorm room somewhere or who's completely marginal figure. Someone like Bernie Sanders, who was the most notable socialist in America at this point, was arguing for a kind of a social democracy akin to what goes on in Scandinavia. Mm-hmm. No one is setting the prices of lipstick or dog food or whatever in those Scandinavian countries.
In fact, in those Scandinavian countries and in Canada, often even if you look at conservative institutions, will rank the countries you're referring to as more economically free, as less socialist in the conservative sense, because they have more free trade, they have less regulation, they have less bureaucracy.
That's a key point. Regulation is not socialism. So to that end, to get back just to the clip a little bit, Bill Maher is making the point that when there is a fire, when there is a crime committed, we have this understanding that there should be some social right to having someone to come and put out your fire, even if you can't afford for a fire station. That there should be someone to investigate a crime, regardless of whether or not you can afford your private mercenaries or whatever. And that many people think that the same should be true of your health care. That if I get cancer, if I have diabetes, that my ability to treat my illness should not be contingent on how much I earn for a living, or whether or not my spouse who brings home the bacon loses their job and loses insurance for our entire family. My ability to have my kids get the same education as Bill Maher's kids or a rich person's kids shouldn't be contingent on my salary. All those kinds of things. And that moving in that direction is the kind of thing that Chris Sununu is referring to as socialism. It has to be, because what else is anybody advocating for in the contemporary American political context? And at a certain point, are you just, punching a ghost to say, oh, you shouldn't be that mad at Donald Trump, or, Donald Trump might be bad, but you still have to be Republican because otherwise we're going to end up in socialism? Well, the kind of socialism that I think most people are fond of, the kind of socialism that Bernie Sanders was fighting for, statistically is very appealing to Americans. So I just don't know how far Chris Sununu is going to get with that argument.
Yeah, it hinges on how you're defining the concept, and I agree that
we had this thing about definitions with Bethany Mandel recently in Woke, and I think it's just important to talk about what you're talking about. And I will laud Bill Maher there for bringing up specific examples. Mm-hmm. If you don't like socialism, if you're against socialism, let's just bring the conversation down to exactly what we're talking about. And I've said what I'm talking about, and it's up to people to decide if they also agree with something like Bernie's labor plan to encourage, to make it easier for people to unionize, to make it easier for people to have more democratic control over their workplace, to be able to weigh in on decisions about whether or not their company gets moved overseas so shareholders can get another couple of cents per share, but they lose their jobs and their livelihoods. Whether or not pharmaceutical companies and insurance companies should be able to make billions of dollars of profit a year, use much of that money to go and lobby so that they never are forced to negotiate prescription drug prices so that seniors can actually afford their medications, and on and on and on. you know, you can call that socialism, you can call that common sense, but whatever you call it, it's very, very popular. And I don't know that Republicans like Sununu are going to get very far if they're using that as a fear tactic in this day and age.
We'll have more Rising after this.